fact, at Close Up, $2.36 billion a year. That's what the health and wellness advocacy group New Futures says is the annual cost of the misuse of drugs and alcohol in New Hampshire. The last time they did this study, that figure was estimated at $1.84 billion. So there's been a big jump, and it's expected to be even higher the next time the study is done. Joining us now to break down the numbers, Linda Saunders-Paquette, CEO and President of New Futures, and Brian Gottlob of Poll Econ Research. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Adam.
First of all, Linda, that number, a headline of $2.36 billion, what does that say about addiction in New Hampshire right now?
Well, you know, we all know we have a huge addiction problem in our state, and I think we were aware of the fact that addiction causes personal and social problems. But what we weren't aware of until we did our first study that was released in 2014 was the enormous cost that substance misuse places on our state. And you know, I think for me personally, the biggest surprise after our first report was the impact on our businesses and on our workforce. You know, we know that addiction causes increased costs in healthcare and criminal justice, but really, it's extremely important that we understand the impact on our businesses and workforce.
We'll get to productivity in a second, but Brian, how did you pull together this information? It's just fascinating to see if this is a large sort of global look. How do you actually come up with that number of $2.36 billion?
Well, it's difficult. There's a lot of data sources involved. I think it's important to note that there's been a lot of research on the negative consequences that drug and alcohol misuse have on individuals. And so we rely to a degree on prior research. We know that alcohol influences a lot of medical costs, cirrhosis of the liver, but a whole host of other impacts. We know that drugs and alcohol are implicated in an awful lot of criminal acts and criminal justice costs. So it's a matter of pulling together data sources from justice statistics, from medical records, from businesses. It's a big task, and it's a matter of putting together an awful lot of information. And
as Linda mentioned, the number one cost is to worker productivity.
Yeah.
How do you quantify that when someone is on the way to a crisis, but perhaps are not yet a statistic, I guess?
Yeah, well, again, there's been a good deal of research that has documented the impact that drug and alcohol misuse has on individuals in the workplace. One of the most important impacts that oftentimes isn't thought about is that the fact that it keeps a lot of people out of the workforce. And when we documented that for New Hampshire, we come to the conclusion that it's over 12,000 individuals are not in the labor force as a result of having a drug or alcohol misuse problem. So, of course, had they been in the labor force, they would have been earning money, so we subtract what they would have earned. Now, there are 100,000 or so individuals who are in the labor force who have some alcohol or drug misuse issue. Research shows that those individuals tend to be less productive, and we measure that in terms of their earnings. People who have an alcohol and drug misuse problem earn less. So when you add that all up, you get a very large number, over $1 billion.
Yeah, and that $2.36 billion is big, but you're saying it's going to be even higher the next time you guys do the study. Why is that?
Well, that's because the data that Brian relied on in doing his report is for the most part from 2014, and that's before we were even in the height of the opioid epidemic that we're experiencing now.
So we're going to see these numbers go up, unfortunately. We talk a lot about the opioid crisis, but one of the big takeaways from this research is that alcohol is still taking a tremendous toll on our society. The percentage of this, you know, we have all of this effort and impetus placed on the opioid crisis, and we have another one right in front of us, but it's sort of been normalized in a way, hasn't it, Linda?
Well, I think so, but we cannot forget that alcohol kills more people in New Hampshire than all other drugs combined. And the other thing that we have to keep in mind is that now we might be in the midst of an opioid crisis. I was talking to a former state trooper last evening, and he said, you know, a few years ago, we were in the midst of a meth crisis, and now we're seeing carfentanil, you know, this extremely potent synthetic drug that's killing more and more people. And a few years from now, it may well be something else.
Right. And Brian, you were nodding your head there that alcohol really is part of the headline here.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, you know, we're in a little bit of a danger of forgetting about the problem that alcohol causes. We've known about alcohol as a societal problem for a lot longer than we have drugs. And that's part of the reason why drugs aren't as big a number in this report is that there hasn't been as much research in terms of the negative consequences in drugs. And I'll give you one small example. We do a very good job of recording the motor vehicle crashes that are attributable to alcohol. We don't do that with drugs. So that's just one small example of data where we're very good at acknowledging the impact of alcohol, but not in drugs, and there are many others.
This report also focuses on what works, essentially, what is helping to mitigate some of the aspects of the drug crisis. Linda, in particular, what does this say about the Affordable Care Act?
Well, I think the data in the report, and by the way, this is the good news in the report, right? The Affordable Care Act, particularly two provisions of the Affordable Care Act, the provision that allowed states to expand its Medicaid program, and also the provision that required health plans to cover substance use disorder services on par with medical services. Those two provisions have resulted in an increase in access to treatment for people. And when you think about the impact of substance misuse on our labor force, we know that addiction is a chronic relapsing disease and people recover from it. So if we ensure that people can get access to treatment when and where they need it, they can recover, re-enter the workforce. We at New Futures hear story after story about people who start out in the criminal justice system as a result of their substance misuse. Many of them are available to access drug court, for example. Most of the services that people receive through the drug court program are supported through Medicaid expansion. They graduate, they get into recovery, re-enter the workforce, become employees on employer-sponsored health plans, and, we're reinvigorating our workforce.
And people look at the price tag sometimes of things like the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion. In your research there, Brian, essentially you state that the drug crisis is a drag on local state tax revenue, up to almost $90 million, even with these programs.
Yeah, sure. If you've got people who are not in the labor force, obviously they're not earning, they're not consuming, they're not paying taxes the way individuals who would be in the labor force and earning. Also, people who are in the labor force who have drug and alcohol misuse issues are earning less. It all reduces the size of the New Hampshire economy by, in total, about 3% of the New Hampshire economy. When you shrink the economy from that drug and alcohol misuse, you're not going to collect as much in revenue. And the estimate, and I'd say it's very conservative, is about $90 million.
And there's a generational aspect to this that is so fascinating. A lot of people frame this in terms of what we worry about our kids and drugs. We're seeing that adults and older adults are even being impacted here, and they're part of this issue, perhaps even as much as the children are.
Well, I'm going to look to Brian about this because there's an age group within the population that is, our primary workforce, and that age group tends to be impacted by substance misuse greater than, either the young or the old.
Certainly when you're talking about alcohol, it tends to be cumulative over a lifetime, and people in their prime earning years, which is generally 35 to 54, that's the largest portion of our workforce right now. And so it represents the largest number of individuals who have an alcohol problem, at least. And the issue of drugs, we used to think of drugs, I think, primarily as affecting young people. One of the things that the data shows is that, unfortunately, what we're seeing is greater problem with drug misuse among our older population, ages above 26. And so I think that's one of the problems that's compounding and increasing the cost to society of drugs.
And Linda, as we wrap up here, what's the ultimate goal for what this information can do?
I think the goal is for policymakers to really take a look at this information. And right now, as they are in the process of setting their spending priorities, to realize that investing in policies that increase access to treatment, Medicaid expansion, ensuring that people have coverage, and also something in New Hampshire called the Alcohol Fund, which provides a significant amount of resource to the prevention, treatment, and recovery system. Those are all things that ought to be priorities for our policymakers during this budget session.
Linda Saunders-Paquette, President and CEO of New Futures, Brian Gottlob of Polycon Research. Thanks for educating us so much about our New Hampshire economy.
Great, thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.